My God, my God, my God. Good morning, family, and a good, great morning it is. I hope that you are doing well in your neighborhood, wherever you are. But look at here, don't stay there too long because we're going global today. Go send who? We'll find out in just a moment. I'm going to give some of my friends and partners and such a moment to get in place and get in position because you do not want to miss this conversation. Let me send this out to the highways and byways. And if you're already on, let me get you to share it on your particular social media links as well because I promise you it is going to be a treat to listen in on this conversation on today. Listen, about 14 years ago, God blessed my life with a sister that I didn't know I had, but He knew that I needed. Since then, I've been blessed with a personal, intimate relationship with one of the dearest persons you'll meet on the planet. She has a heart of gold. She is brilliant. She is extraordinary. She's a student of the Word of God. She loves God and loves His people of every sort and kind you'll find. When I met her, she was leading one of the lead voices in a space that I had not become very acquainted with, to be honest with you. It was, some call it modern day slavery, human trafficking, and the way she graced the stage, not only of that particular platform, but of my life, and had the privilege to have her to come to Joshua House of Worship and share the word. And oh my God, everybody loved her. So I have really been blessed by her leadership, by her partnership, and just her presence now over 14 years. And God has done some things in her life. And today's conversation is opportunity to get caught up again, but also for you to meet this individual that I'm telling you, when you hear from her, you'll know that you've met a sister for life as well. So without any further ado, I want to introduce to some and present to others my beautiful sister, Dr. Tommy Grover, Human Advocacy Director. What's going on, sis?
I'm going to have to get the recording of this to get it up every morning before me so that I can go, oh, there's the president of my fan club telling all about it. I just feel so blessed. So,
Uh,
so blessed.
I'm the blessed one. I tell you, it's been a minute since I've seen you, but I've heard from you quite often.
Yeah, yeah. And just so blessed to be connected in the way that we have been over these years.
Yeah.
Who'd have thunk it, way back when I started my work in this space, and God gifted me some real gems along the journey,
Wow.
to which I count you one of them. And I'm just so, so grateful for your partnership and your friendship over the years. You've been a pastor to me.
Wow.
There's nothing better than a pastor's pastor, and one who will lift you up, and you know it. And that blesses my life beyond all that I could ask or imagine.
Oh
Really
my
does.
God. I love me some you. This is what I want to do today. I want you to just kind of really unpack and introduce your history into this space of human advocacy. We'll talk about where you are now, and we'll talk about the need, and um, hopefully obtain some partners and all that type of stuff. But I want people to know your heart. I want people to know you. Um, when we talk a lot about even ministry and business and all those types of things, people join and lock arms with people they connect with. And the reason I'm so honored to be connected with you is because of your heart. So I want you to kind of unpack that. I don't want this to be anything official today. Want to let the hair down.
I have almost as much as you.
Looks good on you. Looks real good on you. And just unpack. Take us back 14 years ago. Well, actually, before 14 years. Let's go back to I think you with Dallas Police Department.
No, not Dallas Police Department, but
Really?
I do have a history in law enforcement. I was trained as a police officer in Gainesville, Florida,
Oh,
back when I finished at the University of Florida. Go Gators! Yeah, go Gators for all you who watch college football. We are in it. And those were the years when we chanted, "It's great to be at the bottom of the SEC," because all we won over was Vanderbilt. And so, I go way back when Emmett was there, Emmett
all
Smith was there, all that kind of stuff. But I finished my bachelor's in criminal justice and went to work for the University Police Department. Then I went to the city police department, and I was working law enforcement communication, and really had a heart to help people even back then. But I didn't know what God had for me as the next steps. And I had become a believer in Jesus in 1981.
right.
And yet I was still living my life on my own terms, telling him what I was going to do. And he kept saying, not so fast here, young lady. And at about 9 years into my journey, I realized that I had salvation and a knowledge of who Christ was, but I had not yet made that transition from what was in my head to what was in my heart. And when he really started to move my heart to become an obedient follower of who Christ is, then it really changed the trajectory of my life and saying, I'm done trying to do it my way. I'm surrendering it all at this point. And for what I could understand at that point, I felt like God was calling me to vocational ministry, but I wasn't sure what that meant.
Mhm.
So I left law enforcement communications, went to work for a local church, and God started speaking to my heart about preparing for equipping the church to do the work of the ministry. I said, I don't know what that means. So I told my husband, I think I'm supposed to go to seminary. And he said, we're not dead yet. We're not going there. Because the closest thing he knew was cemetery, right?
Right.
And I said, no, it's not cemetery, like where they bury you when you die.
Right.
It's seminary. Well, they might as well bury you when you go there because there's a lot to do.
Mhm.
So I headed off to Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth in 1995, and I had an 8 and a 4-year-old.
Wow.
And it was a crazy period of time in my life. When I finished my master's in Christian education, and God kept drawing me back to the educational pieces and said, I want you to do a doctorate. And we're like, you got to be kidding here, at that point. So I ended up doing a PhD in social work and ministry-based evangelism, and it really covers the whole of what it means to care for God's people in a way that is holistic and comprehensive. And what does that look like? How do we do these things? And God married a history in criminal justice work with a newfound trajectory of meeting people where they are most vulnerable and have needs, and bringing God's compassionate action into that space. And so I finished my PhD, and my kids were 18 and 14. And it's been a journey of one level of obedience after another, asking God what it is that He would have me to do. I
Wow.
worked for Texas Baptist, and that's where we met. I was working for Texas Baptist. I started with them in 2001. And in 2006, they had a resolution condemning him. And it became a part of my work because I was leading their efforts in community and restorative justice at
Mhm.
that point. And so, because it's criminal activity, human trafficking is, it came a part of my work. And
Mhm.
I began educating myself and then educating others, the churches, and those kinds of things. And 2009 is when we started the Traffic Stop campaign.
Mhm.
And it was an educational endeavor for Texas Baptist churches, but it went beyond that. At the next juncture in spring, they asked me to be a thought leader in another area and said, what if that it doesn't include human trafficking? And I was so what I call gloriously ruined to this issue of human trafficking, because it was my cannot not do
Mhm.
issue. The Lord had just so broken my heart over what was happening to people around the world that I began a process of doing educational entrepreneurship with Traffic Stop, and did a lot of education and training and those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And the Lord spared my life during that period of time. Literally, had a catastrophic surgical event that the doctor gave me less than half a chance of living through. And yet God spared my life, and the devil didn't get any glory there. And we started that 10 at 10 for I-10, which was the prayer initiative over which we met
Yes.
during that period of transition. And I started the prayer for trafficking on along Interstate 10 that met on the 10th of October in 2011 for the
Uh-huh.
very first time.
Wow.
And that's what we've been doing for a number of years, is praying that God would intervene in the trafficking across the United States, because there's a lot of trafficking that goes with the infrastructure. And fast forward, I had an opportunity to finish that work in December of 2017, did some other consulting. And then in 2018, I actually became a part of the child sex trafficking team at the Office of the Governor here in the state of Texas. And I worked there for nearly 4 years, helping the counties in North Texas to develop protocols for how to intervene and intersect with the children who are being trafficked right here in North Texas. And so I did that for almost 4 years, and had never during this period of time from 2006 on taken an opportunity to just rest and reevaluate what God would have me to do next. And so I've been on sabbatic, and the Lord really started to show me that I'm not done yet. You know, you're still above the dirt. You're not done yet. You've still got opportunities ahead of you. And I have known the organization that you mentioned, Go Send Me Global. Go Send Me Global is an organization for sending missionaries around the world and into various locations. And they're trusting that what I can do is help them as an organization to begin the process of educating the missionaries that they have, and help others who are drawn to this topic of exploitation, oppression, trafficking, to find their place to serve in the world and in God's compassionate actions. And so this is the great adventure for the next season of my life, is really being able to participate with the organization of Go Send Me to see how we can further God's compassion to the world and to those that are most vulnerable.
Absolutely. Let me tell you, what a journey, a stretch. Did you see yourself in your teenage 20s doing anything?
No, I think even when I became a believer, and then when I surrendered to Christ's lordship of my life, if he'd have told me what I've been doing for the next 20 years, I'd have said, oh, I think I'll do something else. Thank you very much. Because if he tells us everything up front, there's nothing for us to trust him for. And, you know, he didn't say to Abraham, here's where I'm taking you. He said, go, I'm sending you.
Oh my God.
And Abraham had to be obedient.
Yes.
Just to go where God sent him, one step at a time.
Yes, my God, what a calling. And the thing of it is, it's not about glamour, but it's about the call. It's a divine call. And when you communicated the gospel at Joshua House of Worship 14, well, somewhere in that neighborhood, about 14 years ago, I can't remember the exact phrase, but you said something along the lines of jumping out of.
Oh, I know, because I know, because I went skydiving for my 50th birthday, and I said, you're jumping into the nothingness of the air and to the everythingness of God's care.
Yes.
And that's the leap of faith that becoming a Christian is you're leaping into an adventure of a lifetime to say, okay, God, here's my hands. I hope you can see my hands, okay? Yeah. But here I am jumping into what I don't understand, but trusting that your hands are there to catch me, whatever that looks like.
My. That so personifies you, your life, your work, your calling. And I think you were the one that led me on my 50th birthday to do my skydive. And maybe that's why we're so connected in that regard.
That adrenaline will rush you.
Yeah,
It will rush you.
it's a trust. It's a
Mhm.
faith walk that I've seen you on, and that's so encouraging. Not knowing what it's going to look like, where you're going to be. Everyone does not really line up that way. I don't know if it's a special calling, a special gift that God gives you. How would you describe it?
Well, I can tell you this: bravery and stupidity only have one thing in common, and it's a why. My why to serve the Lord is much bigger than my bravery, and it's much stronger than my stupidity. And I really believe that God will use the least among us
My
to
God.
prove that He is God.
Yeah.
And I count myself among the least of us, because there's no reason that this old white woman should have any privilege anywhere in the world, but that God's grace, even how He connects us with other believers who are like-minded to be all in on what God has for us.
Absolutely.
And I count it a privilege to be on this adventure, because a lot of people get into faith and they think their life is over because it can't be fun anymore. And the reality is when you live in the freedom of Christ
Ooh,
and your life is completely surrendered to what He wants you to do,
yes.
it's the greatest adventure of all. It
My,
really is, because it's not about what you alone can accomplish, but what He can accomplish through you.
yeah.
And I'm speaking to myself here, just having started this now just this month and looking for the Lord's divine direction and His affirmation and following the compass that He's
Yeah.
set before me.
Yeah.
What is true north? How do I follow what He's calling me to? It takes a lot more to be a participant
Mm-hmm.
and have to hear His voice for every step
Mm-hmm.
than to have somebody give you the steps to move forward. We all want the 5 steps to blah blah blah. Well, when you have to wait on the Lord to show you what the 5 steps are instead of somebody else figuring it out for you,
Right.
it's a lot more trust and faith and all of those things.
Yeah.
I see that the Lord wants us desperately to love Him and to believe what He has to say and have the faith
Mm-hmm.
to hear the voice. Jesus is the one who says, I do nothing without my Father telling me what to do.
Yeah.
And I want to be that kind of follower. I
Yeah.
want to hear His voice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What it really is, Doc, is true discipleship, not just being a member in the pew with a name on a roster, but really pursuing, following Him and what that
And
looks like.
He's looking for people
Yeah.
like that.
Yes.
He is looking for those who will compassionately follow what He's trying to get us to accomplish and do.
Mm-hmm. So true. Let me acknowledge a few people that are chiming in with us. We want to thank you for listening in, family. You're listening to the powerful testimony. You're getting to know our dear sister, Dr. Tommy, and we're going to unpack a few more things. We got Minister LaPonda Lewis, a daughter in ministry, is here. We love you, darling. I hope that you're feeling much better. You got your pep back in your step. We got Dr. Ernestine Stamps here in San Antonio. Thank you for chiming in. We got my brother and friend, Pastor Jogadish Ray, I believe in Bangladesh. Correct me if I'm wrong. Put your home country in the chat for me. I want to make sure that I'm correcting that. Then we got my good friend, my brother, Pastor Danny is in the house, and our beautiful sister Gwen Johnson, all the way out there in California, is in as well. Thank y'all for listening in. I would ask that you would share this information. And we're going to go deeper now because we really want to unpack this human advocacy. What does that mean? It's a term that I don't say that phrase every day. What is a human advocate and advocacy and all of that? And then what does it mean to be the director of that? So let's kind of unpack all of that. Now I'm going to pull up a banner, and if I could get this thing right, there is a link that I would encourage you all to go to, and that's gosendmeglobal.org/Tommy Grover. That's going to be a site that you can go to. If you hear anything of value that would in any way cause you to say, you know what, I want to hear more about this, I want to know more about this, or maybe God has already put it in your heart, you have a heart for missions, you have a heart for outreach, seeing lives change, not just in the local community, but abroad, then this is the person that you want to connect with. That's her particular link. And you can contribute. There's no amount, small or great, because the work is global. The work is huge. And we appreciate your partnership in every way. But Dr. Tommy, do this for us. Talk to us about your most recent invite. Now, you just took the position, but it wasn't something that you just found out about. Take us back to the backdrop of that story. How long have you known Go Send Me? And I played with the words there. I said, go send who? Because people are like, who? Me? You know? Mm-hmm. So go send who? Talk to us about Go Send Me Global, what you've known about them, and now your position as the Human Advocacy Director.
So I have known the executive director, just like I've known you from my work at Texas Baptist. He was a pastor in West Texas, and I had done some consulting with him while I was with the convention, and we had stayed connected. Our hearts, like ours, had been connected over the work, and we've just stayed friends over this amount of time, almost the same period of time. And during this 14 years, he transitioned to do work in missions, and he was working with an organization that had sent him to Europe, and he was really finding great success in some of the work that he was doing, but he didn't feel supported by the organization that he was with. And so he decided that God was asking him to start Go Send Me Global as a mission sending organization that was 100% faith fundraised, where the organization itself did not require of its missionaries who work with them to pay a percentage of their income to the organization in order for them to get the support that they needed, which is really a paradigm shift for most missional organizations. Because what his experience had been was of all of his fundraising, he had to give a certain percent back, but the organization was building buildings and buying property and doing a lot of admin stuff. And he said, that's not the way that I sense God would have me to work in the world. Mm-hmm. And to use those funds with great stewardship and integrity, he said, I really believe what God would have us to do is to work together to all individually as participants in Go Send Me Global, is to raise our funds, and that the organization raises its own funds to support those who are a part of its team. Mm-hmm. So it's a very different paradigm. And I've always had a job, Mel. I always have had somebody paying the way, and never had really considered what it meant to be a support raised missionary. Right. And yet the way that this organization has positioned itself, I really think it's the biblical narrative of what happened in the book of Acts with all the apostles, that they were going out. And some of us are bivocational. Some of us are, being sent by the churches to do the work of missions. Mm-hmm. And I've known this organization since its inception. Mm-hmm. And Rob Casey is the executive director, and he has developed a way to help missionaries to find their place of service, and then to equip them and keep them cared for. One of the greatest challenge for a missionary is when they get on the field is like, it's not just about the money. It's not just about people sending financial support. It's about them being cared for.
Right.
Spiritually, emotionally. What does that look like? And Rob right now is with the associate director. They just went to Slovakia and to Germany, and they've met with missionaries who are there so that they can encourage them to really support them and to bring new pieces to their work if they have something that they really need help with, educationally and that kind of thing. So the reason to join with Go Send Me was not because they had offered me such a great package. That wasn't it. It was the challenge of being able to provide my gifts, skills, talents, and abilities to an organization that really wants to be on the cutting edge of what God's work is in the world.
Mhm.
And how could I be of support to them? What would that look like?
Mhm. Mhm.
So they have noticed in the missional work around the world that the challenges for people in the world today includes all of the pieces that are listed in Luke chapter 4, verse 18 and 19.
Mhm.
And yet they feel that their missional work has to have some fortification in order to understand how to bring the great compassionate actions that Christ calls us to. So let me just read that real quick from Luke chapter 4. It says, this is where Jesus is in the temple. He's just had the 40 days in the desert with the enemy tempting him, with the devil giving him all kinds of grief. And he comes into the temple and he takes the Isaiah 61 scroll and he reads from it. And this is a part of what he read in Luke 4, 18 and 19. The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. That's verses 18 and 19.
Yes.
And it's a part of that verse that provides the compass for what does it look like to advocate on behalf of humanity around the world, who are the poor, who are the oppressed, who are those that have physical infirmities, perhaps the recovery of sight for the blind. And I think that recovery of sight for the blind is also spiritual blindness that a lot of people have in the world today. And then set the oppressed free. Those are the people who are enslaved. And our estimates of slavery around the world is about 50 million people at this point. There's more slaves in the world today than in any other 350 years of the transatlantic slave trade. I find that pretty abhorrent that God's people would be enslaved around the world. And so it's about understanding that verse as a part of the great compassionate actions, because we know the great commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself, right? And then the second is the Great Commission, where he says, go and make disciples, teaching them everything I have commanded you. But we've somehow missed this piece of great compassionate actions to do these things on behalf of those that are in some of the most desperate situations that we could ever imagine. So it's been that transition of moving toward the church fulfilling these things. Jesus says, this is why I've been sent. How do we miss that?
Right.
So my goal in the human advocacy role is to advocate on behalf of those that are least likely to be heard, least likely to be seen, most likely to be overlooked in what might be a really important part of how God wants to bring compassion. When you think about when the Israelites were freed in Egypt, it was Moses at the burning bush where God says to him in Exodus chapter 3, I'm seeing what's happening. I'm hearing the cries of the children, and I'm compassionately responding. I'm sending you.
Wow.
Moses, who made all the excuses about how he couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't, doesn't speak too good. But when you compare what they say of him in Acts chapter 7, he was known for having lived in the king's palace, been trained as a warrior, and was known as an eloquent speaker, right? All those things, what happened to all of that? Well, it was Moses who decided he was going to run ahead of God on freeing the people when he called him, and ended up killing the Egyptian in order to get to the place where he went and spent the first 40 years in the desert. And during that 40 years, God spoke to him and said, now you will listen because I've had your ear for 40 years, kind of thing,
Yeah.
So it's a part of the narrative of God's freeing the captives that continues today.
Yes.
So my goal is really to first get people praying about this issue,
Mm-hmm.
because we live in the comfort and affluence of our society here in North America, especially. For those who are around the world, they understand what poverty is and what that looks like, and yet they need God's divine intervention and solutions for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he doesn't ask us to come in as vigilantes and be short-sighted. He asks us to come with his compassion, and what does that look like? And that's going to be different from context to context. So
Mm-hmm.
my 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 real passion is for people to pray
Yeah.
that God will send his people
Yeah.
to do these great acts of compassion for
My,
those that are most vulnerable.
what a call. Let me ask you, I don't know if we had a conversation about it. You're familiar with the movie that was recently released a couple of months back, Freedom?
Sound of Freedom.
Yes.
Yeah.
How much does that play, that type of narrative? How much does that play into the work that the church is really called to? Is there a correlation there?
Let me answer this really, really carefully.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because Sound of Freedom has opened a door for being able to talk about trafficking,
Mm-hmm.
that people feel particularly compassion driven
Mm-hmm.
response by. Remember, that was the same thing that drove Moses.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, what they're teaching is a narrative of vigilantism.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't think that's a God response.
Mm-hmm.
And they use what seems like a very biblical narrative.
Mm-hmm.
God's children are not for sale is one of the key hallmark lines from that movie. God's children are not for sale.
Right.
And that is true. God's children are not for sale.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie gives us a platform on which to begin discussions, but that movie is about Tim Ballard and his vigilante spirit and the way that he chose to do things in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That I think if you follow his life right now,
Mm-hmm.
it's devolving and exposing a history that is not good.
Okay.
So I'm very careful to say that this movie, even on their website, it says this is not an accurate depiction of trafficking in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. But people take that narrative, like years ago, the movie Taken, people really were motivated to respond to trafficking, but the narrative was not the typical narrative of how people get trafficked.
Mm-hmm.
The elements of trafficking are force, fraud, and coercion.
Mm-hmm.
And in some places in the world, people are literally forced to exploitive labor or to be trafficked
Mm-hmm.
by means and mechanisms of those that are in their community who
Mm-hmm.
force them to do things.
Mm-hmm.
We have that here in the United States. We have a lot of interventions that way. And then we also have the fraud, which is a big part of what happens where people are offered opportunities that are really not opportunities at all. And once they get on the other side of accepting what was offered,
Mm-hmm.
then it's changed. The narrative is very different.
Right.
That could be work, labor trafficking. It could be domestic servitude. It could be a lot of different things. Sex trafficking gets the most press because it's sexy, right?
Right.
That's the narrative that a
Right.
lot of people really gravitate to. And
Mm-hmm.
it's to me, it's one of the most egregious forms of trafficking is sexual exploitation,
Mm-hmm.
especially children. And so the movie gives us an opportunity to have a conversation, but to re-educate on what the realities are of trafficking. Here in the United States, children are tricked every day on social media. They go and meet people that they meet on social media, and they have become influenced by these individuals, and then pretty soon they're in a situation that they had no idea what was going to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And sex trafficking of children in the United States is a real and present
Mm-hmm.
danger. But it's usually because they've met somebody in an online space,
Mm-hmm.
and they have these false narratives of what a relationship is supposed to be about.
My Lord, my Lord, my God. Well, Doc, here's what I want to do. I want to put this link back up first because I want to encourage someone to reach out to you. And I want you to close this out talking about the different levels of help, the different levels of support, engagement, involvement. Not everybody's going to do the same thing. Whether it's the high end, I'm leaving my home, my family, or taking them with me, we're going to another country. That's a calling. That's not something that everyone is going to do, but I do believe that everyone can do something. Can you talk to us about those levels and those different layers and whatnot, and how we can get involved?
First, I want people to understand that their financial support is based on what God is asking them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that if there's something in the message from what I've explained that God's asked me to do that resonates with their hearts, then the ask is really about what does God want them to do,
Mm-hmm.
and how can they help fulfill what God's actively participating call sending is in the world today for the work that he set before me. So what is it that resonates with you in your heart about what God would call you to do to
Mm-hmm.
come alongside me with this adventure? And
Right.
it is really, it's between them and God at what level they feel moved to participate, and what God is asking of them to provide for this type of ministry. And it could be that the work will be a part of what they really want to see God accomplish in the great compassionate actions. So there is really a level of trust and support that I've had to come to with
Mm-hmm.
Hebrews 13:5. That it says God will never leave us, God will never forsake us, but it's about learning the contentment of the Lord. And I think as we pursue God, He will lay on our hearts what our part could be. One of the things that you have always blessed me with, Mel, is this heart to serve those that are missional.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that even your travel business, the things that you're doing there, you've committed a certain percentage of your book sales to this endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a level of commitment. That's here's my offering, Lord. Do with it, multiply it as you would,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll use a portion of that to bless this ministry.
Yes.
That may be somebody else that's on this call. That may be somebody who's an entrepreneur who
Yep.
wants to see that what they're doing is providing a direct connection to the missional support that God would provide for this work. And so I would say, ask the Lord what your part is and how you are personally compelled to participate in the work. But nothing is too small. I had somebody donate $50 the other day, and it paid for my business cards because I've got to be able to tell people
Yeah.
what's out there.
Yeah.
And that was big to me because I can make that happen with it. I really believe God wants to do some things in this ministry. I've put together a budget, but it's just a guess that it's going to take me probably between $1,300 and $1,500 a month in order to have what I need in moving forward, just to do the work of the ministry. And
Right.
then I've put together a very modest salary budget so that I can make sure that the needs of our household are taken care of. And I believe that's a part of what the scripture says, is that the workman is worth their wages. And at this point in my life, I really understand God's provision is God's provision, and I'm going to trust Him with what that is. And when you sign on with GoSendMe Global, you have a couple choices. You're either you take a salary and you have to raise the funds to cover your FICA and all those other things that would be proportionate to what you bring in, or you could do the ministerial way of taking care of all of that. I tell you what, the IRS tells us more about what to do with our money than God does sometimes. And I really kind of resent that. I'm just going to put that out there. If God is leading someone to participate in this ministry, whether you get a tax benefit or not, God's going to be glorified if you do that, irrespective of the tax benefit.
Yes.
Just going to throw that out there. That was free, free pastor. But I would say, whatever the Lord leads you to do is what I would want for you. I don't want to put a dollar amount on it. I want God to have your heart about it. And that's more important to me. And whatever it is that you send, I will know that it is God's fulfilling of this missional endeavor through his people, which I believe is more important than me saying I need $1,000 a month to do the work of the ministry, because I believe God's people who are called and compelled to this great compassionate actions of the Father will respond how he tells them to. Does that help? Or maybe it just muddies the water. I don't know.
That does. That gives us the clarity we need. There's no amount too small and there's no amount too great, because the work that's being done, is changing lives, again, not just in our own native local neighborhoods, but around the globe, and missionaries who have given everything, who have given their all, who have left careers, who have left businesses, who have left even families for the sake of the gospel, who have felt so compelled to do this type of thing. Now, not everybody's going to do that, but everybody can do something. So it's my honor, family. I want to say hello to Nisi Walker is online with us. Thank you for chiming in. If you would share this conversation, this interview with Dr. Tommy, if you would share this on your wall. I got my cousin, Ron Marine. That is none other than my beloved cousin, Sharif. Thank you, sir, for chiming in. He's a member of Homeland. What is it? Homeland. I always mess it up. Security. Is that right? Is that how they? Yeah, Homeland.
HSI.
Yes. So he's
don't give him up.
Yeah, he's doing great. And then we have Aaron Atkins. Thank you for chiming in, beloved. If you would also share, please share this conversation. My good friend, my brother Bo Cool is on. Brother Rice, thank you for chiming in. Hope you got my message the other day. Please give me a call. Everyone, if you're watching the replay, if you're watching it live, please share this. We want to get as much information as we can to those who may be so moved to take some action today. And it's not something that you can just do one time. If you would be so moved by God, maybe you want to do something on a monthly basis. No amount, again, is too large or too small. And then we also have her email. Do you want me to put your number or just your email?
Yeah, the email's great. That's really the best way to get me. I do want to say that there are 5 things that I'm going to be concentrating my work on when it comes to how to intervene holistically and comprehensively. And I want the people to think about standing on the pier, maybe fishing on the pier. I want you to be thinking in your mind, I'm standing on a pier. Because the word I'm going to use is piers to just 5 things that are strategic about being God's compassionate action in the world. It's prevention. How do we prevent this from happening in the world? Whether it's exploitation or trafficking or whatever the issue is, how do we prevent this? I is intervene. How do we intervene appropriately without being vigilante? How do we intervene on God's behalf? How do we be his hands and feet? How do we educate others about the challenges that are being addressed in our local community? What are those things that we can do to educate others about this? What can we do about restorative justice, and that means restoring victims of trafficking or other exploitation. And how can we restore relationships in the community with those that are traffickers? Because we don't want to forget that there's always the buyer, the trafficker, and the victim, or the person who's doing the exploitation. We want the restorative principles and practices to be a part of what we think of, because God is in that restoration business. It also means that we need to see God's justice administered in the world today. And then the last one is S, P-I-E-R-S, peers. What is the systems change that needs to happen in our local context in order for us to have God's compassionate actions to be fulfilled, even in the government systems and those pieces of the systems that we have developed as humanity to respond to this issue? And I really added the systems piece because after working at the office of the governor for 4 years, I could see how important it was to have alignment in all of those partners, whether it's the local law enforcement, the district attorney's office, you name any system player, Health and Human Services, Department of Family and Protective Services, all of those pieces had to come together and align in order to fulfill what the mandate was on the child sex trafficking team. And so when I teach on this, it's the 5 peers approach: prevention, intervention, education, restoration, and systems change. So if you walk away knowing we have a mandate in the scripture, but we also have God's strategy on how to fulfill that on behalf of the people who are most voiceless in our communities. So I hope that's helpful, and I'll be making sure that if people are participating in the ministry, that they're learning as they go, so that they can feel like they're a part of God's solutions to the world today.
Absolutely. Well, once again, ladies and gentlemen, go to the site, gosendmeglobal.org, and that'll give you the backdrop of everything they do, but then put that / Tommy-Grover on it to be a partner with the work that is being done. She did mention I have a book that one of the things that God has put in my heart, and I was so honored that my sister was able, I don't know if you guys can see that. No, you probably can't see it, but that's her right there on the back cover with a statement. And one of the things I'm doing in particular, there are 3 key areas. 25% of the proceeds of this most recent work. In fact, just got a email. The order has been completed, and I'll pick the rest of these up today. So if you've ordered copies, they'll be here in my possession. So no later than late evening to tomorrow morning, I'll be at the post office getting everything out to you guys. But this work here, Going Places, it's the best time ever for going places. Don't forget, let God send you wherever you go. And don't forget that we are called to go. That is the Great Commission. As she mentioned, the Great Commandment. I love that correlation there. They go together, the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. We dare not go to do anything for the Lord without great compassion being a part of the whole very reason where we're going. That just makes sense. But this book is called Going Places. It's much more than a book. It's a mindset, it's a mandate, and it's a mission. And every single time in our travel club where our team goes anywhere, we've committed ourselves with our time, talent, and treasure to do some form of ministry work in some capacity when we arrive. We're not just going for recreational purposes only. We're always going to be mission driven in that regard. Not only that, but 25% of the proceeds of each book that we sell is devoted to these 3 areas. That's for me. Each author will do their own thing, but one will be the work of foster and adoption. We call that orphan ministry. The other will be in the area of domestic violence, and with our dear sister, global missions and human advocacy. So we thank you for your support. In fact, I'll put a link up. If you'd like to order a book and you're watching this broadcast, we're going to devote today's portion or replay portion. It'll go straight to Dr. Tommy and the work that she's doing. 25% of the proceeds of this book. You can place your orders at that particular PayPal link. We have a website that's still forthcoming to make it even neater, but for right now, you can just use that. Dr. Tommy, I want to give you your closing comments. Anything you'd like to say in regard to close us out?
It's amazing to me how God connects the community of believers around the world to accomplish his greatest purposes. You, brother, are one of those great connectors, and I am so blessed to have you in my life. You know, the world says we're 6 degrees away from knowing anybody in the world, and I believe we're just 1 degree away, and that is when the Father wants to connect you with whoever he wants, wherever he wants. That's the 1 degree you need to know. You go far to the Father first, and he will connect you. And I believe that he did that not only all those years ago, but he's kept our hearts aligned to see God's greater purposes. And I'm so, so grateful for you. Thank you for this time today. Thank you for this interview and this opportunity to help articulate what's happening with this position and the work that God's gifted me to do
Yes.
in the years ahead. Thank you so much.
Oh, the joy is mine. My skydive sister, we might have to get together and do that again. I love you, darling. We'll talk real soon.
I love you too, brother.
Tell hubby I said
Okay,
hello.
thank you.
All right, bye-bye.